All right, thank you so much. Now that the Finance Minister has tabled his budget speech, we take political reactions, starting with DA leader John Steenhuisen. John, the Minister announcing a 1 percentage point VAT increase over the next 2 years, taking it to 16%. As the DA, do you accept the proposal?
As I said on the way into the budget, we would not be voting for it. It's now become clear why we will not be voting for this budget in its current form. We've been very clear from the beginning that we don't believe that a VAT increase is the right way to proceed, especially if it is not accompanied with bold economic reforms. They're going to focus on going for growth. If we don't get growth, then we're going to be sitting back in October as a government, back in February next year, scrabbling around looking for scraps of money to be able to do what we need to do. We have a medium-term development plan that says that we must lower the cost of living, that says we must absolutely go for economic growth, and that we must make sure that we make government more efficient. There are a number of huge, bold announcements that could have been made today that would have sent the right message out. Instead, we're back in borrow, cut, tax and spend.
Without the DA, can the ANC-led coalition be able to pass this budget?
Well, it's odd to me that a budget would be tabled without confidence that you have a majority. The ANC have 39% in Parliament. They need other people to pass it. If there are other parties that want to support a 1% increase in VAT over the 2 years cumulatively, then obviously they must enter into the negotiations. We are willing to keep the door open to discuss before the instruments come to the floor of Parliament. The fiscal framework, the Money Laws Amendment Bill, and of course the Division of Revenue Act. There is still some time for us to be able to have another chat and another look about what we can do to negotiate further on these, and we remain open to doing so. But this has to be a budget that actually takes account the views and opinions of all of its people, and there are some things that we want. We've said very clearly, we're in this government for growth and jobs. If we are not going to take the bold decisions that go hard for growth and jobs, well then we're going to not lend our support and vote to budgets that don't speak to that. And I hope that sanity is going to prevail. I hope that now we can enter into a more mature period of discussing this, because as this budget currently sits today, it has 39 to 40% of the support. Needs 50% plus one to get over.
Lastly, the Minister announcing that the recommendations for the spending reviews will be tabled before Cabinet in the next month. What are you hoping that will come out of those recommendations?
We had made a number of recommendations around spending reviews. It's something that we support, but I think I would much rather had some very concrete time frames, decisions that before the simple speech was made. And that was one of the things that we've asked quite clearly for, was to be able to have sight of those things, along with some other things that we believe are very important. Things that have been spoken about in every budget, but not done. And that for me is the frustration. We needed a budget today that was going to make a big bunker-busting, bold dash for growth. And this budget, as I've said, is going to harm poorer South Africans and the middle class by increasing VAT. Personal income tax is also going up because there's no provision for bracket creep. And those things perhaps could have been negotiated, but not in an environment where you're not in the same budget putting the big, bold decisions on the table.
All right, thank you so much, John Steenhuisen, the leader of the Democratic Alliance. Mineral and Petroleum Resources Minister Gwede Mantashe, who is also the national chairperson of the ANC. Your partners in the GNU, the Democratic Alliance, say they will not be supporting this budget. Your reaction to that?
No, the issue is that we've been engaging them quite for some time. They want to counterpose everything else on battles that they have lost. They want to counterpose the budget to Bela Bill, to NHI, to expropriation. And we say to them, we cannot counterpose political processes to a budget. A budget is for the country to work, and we cannot succumb to that they exchange political issues for the budget. So they will have to support the budget. Others will support it because it is focused on allocations, on issues of spending, education, health, infrastructure, social grants. Those are the issues that talk to our people. not 0.5% VAT.
The question now, will the ANC get enough support to be able to pass the budget as well as the money bills?
It depends on parties in parliament. Actually, you will see when this debate comes back, it is going to split society into two, black and white. And that is what we should avoid at all costs. Unify society. If we want to polarize it, we can polarize it. But the reality is that a budget is not an ANC budget. It's a budget for the country.
All right, thank you so much. Minerals and Petroleum Resources Minister Gwede Mantashe. I'm going to bring in now Musi Maimane, the leader of BOSA. The minister, the elephant in the room, of course, was the proposal of the VAT hike. Your take on his announcement?
Absolutely, we reject the idea of a VAT hike. I think South Africans are going to be double taxed. It's on VAT, but also on personal tax. You are asking teachers, lawyers, nurses, all citizens to now be paying more tax. What ultimately we need is a growth plan. We are obviously clear about the fact that today there was no prioritization of cutting expenditure so that you can fund growth. Funding growth is about increasing the infrastructure spend, making sure it's efficient. As a committee now that receives the budget, the job that we'll now be doing is making sure that we look at every line item, reduce wasteful expenditure that is not serving the people of this country, and ensure that ultimately all money that is allocated goes towards the people of this country.
All right, thank you so much, Musi Maimane, BOSA leader. We look forward to the debate in the House on the budget. Athol Trollip, the parliamentary leader for ActionSA. The tax increase on VAT has always been the debate going into this budget speech. Your take as ActionSA on the 1% increase on the VAT?
Look, first of all, I want to talk about the fact that this economy can't grow. The minister himself said it's been stagnating for 10 years. And because of that, we have more and more people on social relief to stretch grant. So that's why this budget can't balance. So nothing mentioned about cutting state-owned enterprises that are redundant and obsolete. There's nothing about cutting the cabinet size. No mention of cutting corruption. The only reason we can't grow this economy is because our country is corrupt. It's perceived to be corrupt. There's no property security, and those are the issues that drive away investment. So we can't attract investment. So regardless of Gwede Mantashe says here about polarizing society, society is already polarized, rich and poor. And there are too many poor people in this country, and the ANC government must take responsibility for the fact that they cannot grow this economy. And they are not prepared to tighten their belt, but they expect everyone else to tighten their thin-waisted belts.
Will you vote for the budget?
Absolutely. It looks like we will not be able to vote for this budget because there's no change, there's no policy reform that makes us believe that they can actually implement what they're saying. And there's also his commitment to funding SARS is positive, but there's a disconnect between what he said there and what's written in the white book. So we'll have to go and scrutinize that properly. And if the two dots can be joined up, we can consider it. But there has to be policy change, and there was no indication of policy change.
All right, thank you so much, Athol Trollip, the parliamentary leader for ActionSA. I'm going to swing around now and bring in Dr. John Steenhuisen, the leader of the MK party here in Parliament. Of course, I'm going to just swing around. There's quite a scrum here. Dr. Steenhuisen, firstly, the issues really coming into this budget was always going to be around whether the minister is going to increase VAT. He's announced a 1% increase over the next 2 years. As MK, is that a wise move on his part?
Well, thank you. Good afternoon to viewers at home. We have waited for so long to express our views as the official opposition. In our considered view as the MK party, the minister had a number of options to explore. But the option that the minister chose, in our view, is a wrong one. Increasing VAT by any percentage is disastrous. To increase it by 0.5% this year and next year as well, the people who are going to suffer most are black people. These are the people who pay VAT, and we are going to suffer most.
The question really on your statement, what other options did he have in your view?
There were a number of options. Wealth tax, for example, is very important. There are many tycoons here who should be paying wealth tax. there is no reason why we should not increase wealth tax. The other option is to increase corporate tax. It is a viable option in our view. There are other options. Capacitate SARS and make SARS better able to collect revenue. There are so many people who are getting away with murder, who are not paying their tax. That, in our considered view, would generate a lot of revenue, as opposed to increasing VAT by 0.5%, which no doubt will affect so many people, particularly the poorest of the poor. So from that point of view, the budget speech was a huge disappointment.
The minister argues that increasing the corporate tax will not raise the necessary revenue that is looking for, and it will also discourage investment. Your take on that argument?
Well, we've heard that before. Wealth tax can be improved, can be increased. There is no way investors will run away because they need to invest in South Africa. We've heard that lies before. So those who threaten to pull out, we know they will not withdraw from South Africa. But that, in our considered view, would generate enough revenue as opposed to going down the VAT route.
Lastly, how will MK vote in relation to the budget? Will you support it or reject it? And secondly, do you think the ANC will muster enough support to be able to pass this budget?
Well, let me speak for the MK party. We will definitely reject the budget in its entirety, particularly as it relates to the VAT increase. As for the ANC, I cannot speak for the ANC. They will decide what to do as a party. I can only speak for our party, which is Umkhonto we Sizwe Party, the official opposition party in this country. Whatever happens to the ANC camp, it is none of our making. It is of no interest to us.
So this is not pro-poor budget?
Definitely, in our view, this was a poor budget. There's no question about it.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. John Steenhuisen, the parliamentary leader of the Umkhonto we Sizwe Party here in Parliament. I'm looking around. I see my colleagues are also taking reactions on the floor. All right, I'm going to look for more reactions now here on the floor and try to bring in here the DIRCO Minister, Mr. Ronald Lamola. Please let me bring you into this conversation. Of course, you're quite a busy man in terms of the trade relations between the U.S. and South Africa. The president yesterday in the oral reply session was talking about soon you'll be sending an envoy to the U.S. Is there an indication when that will happen?
When we are ready, all diplomatic efforts are kept within the limits of ensuring that the relationship between the two countries is maintained as it's mutually beneficial. And South Africa, we see that as still very strategic. And we will continue to engage with all the other trading partners. As you are aware, tomorrow we'll be hosting the European Union to further engage on various issues of trade, issues of foreign direct investment in our country, and many other issues of geopolitical interest to all the role players.
Just in relation to how would you characterize the trade relations with the U.S. at the moment? Are they fragile? Are they existing? Are they non-existing? How would you characterize them?
At this stage, they are still existing. The U.S. is our second biggest trading partner. So the issues that are coming from time to time from the White House have dealt with executive order on a few issues, PEPFAR, aid, and also the issue that of expropriation act, which remains necessary because it's a constitutional imperative to redress the imbalances of the past in our country. It's something that we have to continue to do because it's called upon by the Constitution, and everyone who wants to engage with us knows South Africa's history. And we are glad that the Human Rights Council in Geneva has affirmed this important principle of redress in our country. So redress is important for sustainability, it's important for South Africa's diversity, it's important for everything. And it is it's a constitutional imperative. So we will continue to engage with them in that context, including the European Union, and everyone that wants to engage with South Africa.
All right, thank you so much, DIRCO Minister Ronald Lamola. Of course, talking about the relations between South Africa and the USA. I'm going to just quickly bring in here the first DSG of the ANC, Nomvula Mokonyane. Second time lucky, the ANC must be relieved that you at least have been able to table this budget today.
We have to welcome the tabling of the budget, as you say. It is now subjected to parliamentary processes. And what we appreciate are the indicators in the budget around infrastructure spend that is going to contribute towards inclusive growth and creation of new jobs, particularly in the area of transport, in the area of electricity, as well as in water. The second one is on a commitment to create a safety net for the vulnerable groups. We have the increase in terms of the social grant, but as well as the retention of the SRD. And lastly, having listened to the outcry, moving from the initial 2% to where we are, but also with specificities that indicate exactly which areas are going to be affected by VAT.
All right, thank you so much, Nomvula Mokonyane, the first DSG of the ANC. For more reaction now, I cross over to my colleague, Nombu.
Participate in debate, and we'll make a decision when the time comes to make a decision. Yes, sir.
Of course, just getting reaction there following that budget speech. I see there one of my colleagues, Nombu Siziba, trying to get just a statement from the Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana, who's just tabled that budget speech. But we'll continue, of course, to get reaction from various political parties, as you've been hearing and listening to Bulelani Philip just interviewing some of those political parties, getting reaction there. In the main, a number of political parties are saying that this is not a budget that is people-friendly, that they will be opposed and reject this budget should it then come to just debating around that particular debate. But let's see if we can take you back then to my colleague Bulelani Philip. Bulelani, I do believe, and we see you there on the screen, of course, trying to rope in for more commentary. Just give us a sense then what else other political parties are saying.
We're taking more reaction now. I'm going to try and steal Mr. Ngabayomzi Kwangwa here, the UDM chief whip. I'm sorry to trouble you. I know you're waiting in the queue on the other side of the broadcasting terrain. Firstly, as the UDM, you're part and parcel of the GNU. Do you support this budget?
Well, it's difficult not to support the budget. At some point, one has to make a decision that's going to take South Africa forward. Look, we're not happy with some of the proposals, but doing a budget is a difficult balancing act, like an increase had to be made somewhere. I mean, we are the ones who proposed the bracket creep where high income tax earners would not be adjusted for inflation, the income tax bracket, so that they effectively pay more tax into the fiscus. One of the issues that we're concerned about is how do you budget for a VAT increase over 2 years if your plan is intending to grow the South African economy? It means there's no confidence in the plan that's being tabled here, because the minister is making a number of projections around economic growth, meaning you're also financing the SARS, which is very important, so that they can be able to collect more revenue. But at the same time, you're also budgeting for a VAT increase next year. It's nonsense. Really, it shouldn't have happened. What we should have done is, as a temporary measure, we say we're increasing VAT by 0.5%, implement the growth strategy, see whether or not we still are going to have a funding gap or a funding shortfall next year, and consider our options. One of the issues for us is that we understand the point which has been made by the minister. Look, it's a difficult one. For an example, it's a catch-22 situation. If you increase corporate income tax, you're not incentivizing the private sector to try and invest in the economy in order for you to achieve your growth targets. However, our feeling is that everyone should have been expected to make sacrifices around the table. If you're increasing VAT by 0.5%, you should have considered an increase, even if it's 0.5%, in corporate income tax. And for an example, even private individuals or personal income taxpayers are going to contribute more to the fiscus. However, we understand why some of the decisions had to be taken, and I think the taste of the pudding will really be in the eating when we start discussing and debating these proposals proposals in budget committees. As I already indicated last time, this is for all intents and purposes a proposal until Parliament has passed it.
Are you happy about the items that are now being expanded on the zero-rated items for VAT?
Well, yes, but even that is a proposal in our view. We have to look at the items which could potentially be zero-rated. It could not just be a decision of the Finance Minister and Treasury to make those proposals. Secondly, if we're increasing VAT and increasing the number of zero-rated items, you need to also look at how is that going to impact your revenue in the future. For example, if you look at their projections, they are saying the measures now will give them about 28 billion rands. But they are saying if you increase VAT by 0.5% next year, they will only be able to make 14.5 billion rands. You need to ask the question, which ones of those zero-rated items might be impacting that, and how we can plug that shortfall in terms of revenue going forward. So it needs to be a very comprehensive discussion that involves everyone around the table. It's great that the Minister made a number of proposals, but we also need to bring our own proposals on the table.
Lastly, briefly, so you'll vote in favor of this budget, even with your reservations?
No, of course. We have to take South Africa forward. We are going to vote in support of the budget. However, we'll raise our reservations as usual.
All right, thank you so much. Ngabayomzi Kwangwa, who is the Chief Whip of the United Democratic Movement. The Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, now joins me here as he has conversations with Minister Aaron Motsoaledi. Minister, I'm sure you've had a rough couple of the past weeks. Have you been able to get some sleep? I'm sure you must be feeling some sort of relief now that this budget is being tabled.
Oh, of course, yes. It's stressful, particularly for the officials of the department. I sympathize with them. They do most of the work. I don't.
And then in relation to this 1 percentage point increase over the next 2 years, how did you arrive at that? And some people are still saying that you shouldn't have gone that way.
No. Unless you take a 0.5% in this financial year and a 0.5% in the next financial year, and maybe a 0.5% in the next financial year. That's what I've said. So, given the fact that people are talking about, is a commitment to fund the projects that I'm talking about, health and education in particular. So you needed some money. And what we did was to do a combination of two things. The 0.5 VAT, we reduce the 2% to 0.5, and then increase, and then did not give a tax relief on income tax.
And just with regards to the opposition parties, they are saying that you should have opted rather for wealth tax or corporate tax. How do you respond to their criticism?
No, problem in these people, it's nice when you don't have the responsibility. Let me just give you an example. If you go into Rustenburg as we speak, Glencoe has closed 7 furnaces, and the impact on 13,000 employment. Now, if you were saying you are going to fast-track that process of retrenchment by increasing more corporate tax, what do you mean? You're just putting more people on 350. That's basically what you mean. So I don't think it's logical. South African companies are affected by high electricity, weak logistics, and now you're saying let's put more tax on them. It's high unemployment.
You'll be tabling the recommendations of the consolidated spending reviews to Cabinet in the next month. What can we expect to come out of that?
There are spending reviews, but the colleagues, which we want to concede, that spending reviews that have been done. But with the president, we've agreed, let's accommodate colleagues that says, let's do new comprehensive one. We will use the existing one, but do new comprehensive spending reviews with the hope that will generate some savings.
All right, Minister, before I let you go, are you still angry at the SARS commissioner?
No, he's my friend.
You are on the same page now?
We're on the same page. I don't know, we've met how many times over, about 5 times over this, from the 19th to today.
All right, thank you so much, Minister Enoch Godongwana. For just being naughty there, I'm going to bring in SARS Commissioner Edward Kiswita. Sir, coming into this budget, of course, you had called for a bolstering of SARS to be able to get all those people who are not complying with tax. Has the minister gone enough in terms of giving you that capacity to ensure that you collect this tax that is uncollectible at the moment?
Look, of course, we will continue to make that call for the investment of SARS because that's our conviction. A lot has been made in the media of the 800 billion that is uncollected. Let me just explain what that is. A significant amount of that, about 45% of that, is what we call uncollected debt and outstanding returns. And these are debt that may or may not be in dispute. The most significant part is not in dispute, but taxpayers are just not paying it. And in order to get that, SARS has all kinds of legal instruments, from a friendly phone call to taking out a civil judgment, to attaching assets, to appointing third-party agencies to collect the debt. But all of this requires work. You may recall that last year we announced that we had resolved over 2 million such cases and collected an additional 91 billion from that. That work we want to step up because there's a significant amount of work in outstanding returns and in terms of outstanding debt. So the 2 million that the minister has, 2 million of the money that we have been allocated will be focused on driving a debt recovery program for SARS, and based on our past successes, we know that that will add a significant positive yield into the fiscus.
The minister talks about 156,000 people who ought to be paying tax but are not. How are we going to get that number down?
So that's not 156,000. That's a fraction of the number of people who don't tax. So what we have done, using artificial intelligence, we do predictive modeling. What it allows us to do is to detect people in the economy who are economically active. We then correlate that to our tax register, and then we discover that they are not registered, or historically they've not been required to file. And yet you see, because at some stage we may have taken the current status of a taxpayer and they would have been below the filing obligation that we have set. But 10 years later, they have improved their position, and then when you see the assets that they have, maybe the luxury cars or the houses that they own, you say there must be something wrong here. And then we drill down into that, and we have discovered over 30,000 individuals who have economic activity but not registered, and the 156,000 you have mentioned who ought to be filing but are not. And that's the power of data and artificial intelligence. It allows us to collect the dots and then to connect the dots and to find people who consciously and wittingly break the law.
Go after them. SARS Commissioner Edward Kiswita, I wish you all the best in your work in terms of SARS collections. For more reaction, we cross back to my colleague Abra.
Bulelani, thank you very much. With me again, I have Brett Hayden of Good. Mr. Hayden, earlier we spoke about bread and butter issues. How pro-poor this speech?
Well, look, the increase in VAT is going to have an effect on everybody, and that disproportionately affects poor households. So there is going to be an impact on poorer households with this VAT increase. The VAT increase is not as large as was proposed in February, and there is an increase in the number of VAT exempt items. But there is going to be an impact. But overall, the balancing act that the minister achieved is encouraging to the extent that we are avoiding an austerity budget. And our fear was that, or our concern was that, in order to balance this budget, he would engage in large-scale cutting of programs and expenditure. But the expenditure that was important for South Africans and to address economic growth and poverty protection and alleviation remain in the budget. So the increase in the social grants, the retention of the social relief of distress grant, and the transition into some other form of social security, the investment in education so that we can protect the number of teachers and protect teacher jobs, the investment in health, the investment in the rail system is absolutely crucial if we're going to achieve the economic growth. So it was a balancing act of keeping the expenditure in the budget, not cutting it, and there is pain for all South Africans and unfortunately disproportionately for poor South Africans in this increase from 15% to 15.5%.
So would you say the Minister did the best with what he has?
I think the Minister did the best with what was available in the short period of time. The lesson to be learned is that we need a longer runway of time in order to make these fundamental changes that will free up much more funding for projects and also eliminate waste and introduce new tax measures. And so the Minister's commitment and the President's commitment that he referred to of creating a team that will look at each department's budget and eliminate those projects and programs that are not efficient and not having an impact is welcome. You know, the Good has been calling for allocated efficiency all along, so that's a welcome step, and we should start seeing the benefits of that in the next budget. So I think the Minister did the best that he could within the short space of time. It's unfortunate that VAT goes up 15% to 15.5%, but the protection of the expenditure is crucial, and we are very relieved that that has been retained.
Thank you so much for your time. Please just bear with me. Okay, fine. I have another guest over here, Matthew Parks of COSATU. Let me just ask you, how does COSATU feel about what the Minister announced today?
Look, we're disappointed by the VAT increase for the next 2 years. Also not adjusting personal income tax for low income, for middle income workers. That's going to make life more difficult for people who are already drowning in debt, who are struggling to survive with the cost of living, whose wages don't keep pace with inflation. We thought it is unnecessary. There's other alternatives that we had given towards capacitating SARS, to reducing tax loopholes that wealthy, rich companies exploit. But there are good things in the budget too. There's significant infrastructure investments, expanding public employment programs, filling frontline vacancies for nurses, for teachers, for police officers, for doctors. There's measures to kind of protect social grant recipients with a 9.4% increase of the social grants. There's a fuel price relief as well. So there are good things, but all of those good things, which are very good, are going to be lost in the VAT hike. And it's impossible to put perfume on a VAT hike when society is struggling to cope with the cost of living, when society just feels exhausted by corruption, by mismanagement. So that for us is unnecessary, but we hope that in the next week or 2 weeks at Parliament that there'll be some sobriety, people can review these things. We hope we will take our proposals to government and to Parliament and say, let's look at alternatives to increasing taxes upon the poor.
I was going to ask you about the next 2 weeks. Politically speaking, I mean, how do you think this is going to play out?
Well, right now, Treasury doesn't have the numbers to get this thing through. Other parties have indicated they won't support a VAT hike. We also can't support it, and we think Parliament's got the space, it's got the legislative power to review the budget. The budget is simply a proposal. So we hope that Parliament can make a few amendments, give more support to SARS, look at alternative tax measures besides taxing the poor through VAT or through income tax adjustments, and also to adjust the SAD grant for inflation. Those two things, we think we can have a good budget, but the problem is that those two things are so big, they're going to poison the waters of what otherwise are many good aspects to it.
Matthew, thank you so much for your time. Matthew Parks of COSATU. I am now crossing over to Bulelani.
All right, now joining me is Dr. Wanda Mahlatsi, who is the president of the United African Transformation Organization. He now joins me for reaction of the budget speech. Of course, the elephant in the room was always the issue of the VAT increase, the 1 percentage point increase over the next 2 years. Does it appease your concerns coming into this budget?
No, UAT definitely reject this thing, because this thing is targeted to our people, the poorest of the poorest. Now, if you have 0.5 this year, 0.5 next year, in terms of collection, that gives you 30 billion this year, and it gives you 15 billion next year. It's a total of 45 billion. Are you saying you have a government that is well organized that cannot get that money? If you want that money, you'll get it on the wasteful expenditures. On wasteful expenditure, we spend about 125 billion. If you're a government that said that We will work with this party will bring a different skill, best of the best. Where is this best of the best? This GNU has collapsed. They don't have an agenda. Hence you see the budget is shaky. So our position is this. We are here to protect the poorest of the poorest. Go and get this money from corporate, big corporate. Let them be the one that pay for this 45 billion.
All right, on the expansion of the zero-rated items on VAT, has it gone enough to bring relief to the poorest of the poor?
That is not an intention. The intention is to make people suffer. The ANC is no longer representing our people. Now with the additional of these other parties, it's worse. So I'm saying no. The effort.
So can I expect you that you'll vote against this budget?
Definitely. The UAT will vote against. As long as this thing is punishing our people, the poorest of the poorest, it's a no from UAT. Definitely.
Dr. Wanda Mahlatsi speaking passionately. He is, of course, the president of the UAT. For more reaction, I cross back to you, Abra.
I now have another guest with me. I have Mr. Masizole, former Speaker of the Western Cape. Thank you so much for your time. I just want to focus on bread and butter issues and the man on the street and the woman on the street and how this budget impacts on them. Was this a budget that is friendly to people in South Africa who are battling at the moment?
You know, as ACC, we think that this is a budget that becomes an attack on the most vulnerable, the poor and downtrodden. It does not seem to gauge the heart of the economy. The pulse of the economy is saying the economy is not doing well. So you've got to protect and cushion the most vulnerable. With this step that has been taken today by the Minister of Finance, it says that we don't care how poor you are, we don't care how hungry you are, to increase the VAT by 0.5%, which makes it in fact to 16%. So when you buy food for 100 rands, you will pay 116 rands in total. And that is a very, very serious indictment on the government that should protect the poor. So the Alliance of Citizens for Change, we clear that we should protect the poor by increasing the food, the amount of food items that are zero rated. So the minister tried to touch on that, but in a very cosmetic way. We need to increase realistically the amount of food items that are zero rated, but more so parliamentarians must reject this budget increase because it's anti-poor, it's against the spirit that SARS, the very agency that is tasked by the Constitution to collect tax on our behalf, saying we can get more money elsewhere. Don't do it. We have 800 billion rands that we can collect. That's what SARS says, the SARS commissioner who spoke now just here. So we need to listen more, and government must stop this arrogance of playing as if they are the Mr. Know-it-all. The Minister of Finance is supposed to listen more to specialists. So they give more money to defense, that's fine. But the fact that they were not able to increase the social relief of distress, the 370, we actually believe in this country we need what we call a universal wage subsidy, so that everybody can buy food and sleep in a stomach that has got something. More than 20 million South Africans, they sleep without eating in this country. So we reject this budget. We believe that this is an attack on the poor.
Sir, thank you so much for your time. My colleague Bulelani is also standing by right now.
Well, joining me now is Songezo Zibi, the leader of Rise Mzansi, who's also the chairperson of Scopa. But firstly, let's start here. As leaders of political parties, you met with the president this morning. Take us through the mood of that meeting.
The mood of the meeting is the meeting.
I was expecting you to say that, but...
No, the conversation took place last night. It was cabinet this morning. I'm not in cabinet, but the finance minister presented, in essence, to all of us, what he presented to South Africans today. Because I think it's important that we understand the difficulty of putting a budget out of an economy that has effectively stagnated over the last 10 years. I know that all of us want all sorts of goodies. I wanted money for Transnet so that we can start moving goods between places in South Africa, invest in new rail from Rustenburg to all the way to the ports and so on, so that you can reduce the damage on the roads and that kind of thing. That's one of the things I wanted, for instance. But we're not going to get it, not in the short term. So the Finance Minister explained to us the challenges that the Treasury has had. But I'm very pleased that he has responded to the complaint against VAT, because 2 percentage points was a lot.
Of course, the issue of value for money is one of the issues that has been talked about. 1 trillion rand for infrastructure. You as a SCOPA chairperson, how are you going to ensure that that money goes to its intended purpose?
I think what's important, and again, this is why the detail is important, there's actually very little money that the core appropriations in the budget is going to be spent on infrastructure, because we don't have the room. Most of that is going to come from the balance sheets of SOCs. It's by Sanral, it's by Eskom, etc., etc. South Africans need to understand that this is not 2009 anymore. In 2009, President Kgalema Motlanthe and Minister Trevor Manuel announced a 749 billion rand hard cash stimulus into the economy. We don't have that kind of money today, and I think South Africans need to understand that it's very important that we do not lie to them. Therefore, we're counting little pennies here and there, and they're unfortunately not enough. There are two things that are important in this environment. We must always try and cushion the blow on the poor, but it is absolutely important that number of 28 million people that are dependent on social grants reduces over time, because people have a living wage, they've got decent jobs, they've got decent housing, public transport is affordable for them to go to and from work or to go and look for work. So we need to think about budgeting in those terms, not in terms of single issues.
The minister announcing a 20 billion rand saving from the Eskom debt relief. Is that something to celebrate?
It's something to celebrate. We've actually, as a standing committee on public accounts, been engaging very closely on an ongoing basis with Eskom. One of the things Eskom has been absolutely focused on doing is efficiencies, the same efficiencies that we're talking about from government. For example, they are trying to move as much of their volume of coal off the road onto conveyor belts, which are much cheaper. That's got savings in other areas of public spending. You don't damage the roads as much anymore, which means you don't spend so much money on maintenance, having backlog of maintenance and so on. So Eskom have been doing exceptionally well, all the way towards placing a concrete proposal on the table for the eventual writing off of municipal debt if they agree to a certain repayment regime, fixing their own infrastructure and collection and so on. We need to do that with every other entity in government.
Debt service costs for the country remains a headache for the minister. Is he doing the right thing? I mean, is he winning this battle of reducing these debt service costs?
No, he's not. He's not, because Parliament refuses to acknowledge the problem. Parliament refuses to acknowledge the problem. By the end of this financial year, we will be paying close to 500 billion. If we are not careful, 500 billion servicing debt. It's soon going to become the biggest single expenditure item in our national budget. We're talking about SARS collecting money. Most of that money is going to go towards repaying debt if we are not careful. So it is really important that we use public money well. We reduce corruption, we prosecute corrupt people, we eliminate the waste that we see in the system. But most importantly, the board of the South African people that sits here must start acting like a board, and people should not expect goodies when there are none falling from the sky.
Songezo Zibi, leader of Rise Mzansi, I'm going to ask you to step aside for a moment and bring in Vuyo Sungula, the president of the ATM. Of course, the elephant in the room coming into this budget was the proposal of the VAT increase, the 1 percentage point increase over the next 2 years. Does it strike the middle ground?
No, it doesn't, because the real impact when it comes to the poor now need to contend with an increase in electricity prices, fuel prices. We already have high interest rates. We already have a high cost of living. Now, if you add VAT to that mix, you are basically killing South African citizens. The problem, firstly, is that the government refuses to go after big corporates who are making money in South Africa. The amount that is lost through illicit financial flows committed by especially companies in the mining industry, it is very high, but the government does nothing to address that. Secondly, you've got the informal sector whereby foreigners are trading there, not paying any form of taxes, but they're using the infrastructure, using the services, but even the government is not addressing that. Now, if we can go back also to the mining companies, the amount that the mining, the VAT was raised through VAT as opposed to mining royalties, the amount that was raised by VAT was 16 times higher than mining royalties, meaning we've got companies who are not South African-owned companies who are making our economy in terms of our mineral resources, but they're contributing next to nothing. So we have a government, Bulelani, that rather would impoverish many South Africans who are barely surviving instead of finding alternative means of raising revenue.
He argues that increasing corporate tax would discourage investment. Do you buy that argument?
No, we don't buy the argument, because by the time in 1994 came, the tax rate just before apartheid ended, there was a it was 50%, and from 1994 it has been going down and down. But how can they be increasing VAT, which will impoverish the South African citizens, but on the corporate side, there's not even an increase. It has been going down since 1994. Also, Bulelani, there's the issue of the irregular and wasteful expenditure. That is above 126 billion on a yearly basis. Why are they not even going there? Because the Auditor General reports are very clear to say this particular department, this particular municipality has lost money in a wasteful and fruitless expenditure. Why are they not going after the real culprits, but they are rather going after poor South African citizens who are barely surviving?
The increases in social grants, are they sufficient in the current economic climate?
They're not even sufficient. The country, Bulelani, has got a lot of money. If you look at the amount of the mineral wealth that we have, if you look at the companies that are operating, milking our country, the biggest problem we have here is a matter of priorities. You have a government that rather wants to play sweetheart with the big companies, but play that tough figure when it comes to the grants that are produced by the government. There's no grant that is above 5,000 rands, meaning South Africans who are even grant recipients are struggling to survive even with these grants that they are having. So we are not surprised as a party, because this government, GNU, clearly hates South African citizens.
Vuyo Zungula, president of the ATM, of course, we'll look forward to the debate.
All right, of course, my colleagues there in Cape Town just getting us reaction, of course, following that budget speech announcement. Thank you so much to my colleagues there in Cape Town, Bulelani Philip included. A very good afternoon to you if you've just joined us. We've been giving you rolling coverage of the National Budget 2025. I do believe we now have sound. Let's take you back there.
It has been passed by a law of parliament, so there's no other way. He has got to support it. The things he was mentioning here are not his. They come from the cabinet. Yes. So even NHI, it's not his policy or my policy. That's why I was a little bit objecting when you said Minister of NHI. I know it's in a lighter note, but definitely it's important for people to understand that. He has got no choice, he has got to support.
Bring us up to speed with regards to the implementation at the moment.
No, let's take you back to the State of the Nation address and go
supplémentaires en provenance des États-Unis.
Firstly, our battle against HIV is that it needs to come to an end, and that we are going to load an extra 1.1 million people on top of the 5.5 million who are on ARVs. We are going to look for 1.1 million. And we launched that project the very same month the president said so. On the 25th of February, we launched that program. The second thing he said in preparation of implementation of NHI, we are going to go on improving the healthcare system in the form of infrastructure, management and human resources. And he went on to mention a number of hospitals that are going to be built. He never gave you their names. He just mentioned them. New hospitals, replacement where the others have aged, refurbishment and maintenance, and then also community health centers and clinics. In my budget speech in May, I am going to actually give you the details of that. The minister here mentioned 1 trillion rand for infrastructure. That includes healthcare infrastructure. But obviously you don't expect him to unpack it because it will have taken him the whole afternoon.
How do we improve Helen Joseph Hospital?
Well, the recommendations from the Umbad are very, very clear. He made recommendation to the Department of Health in Gauteng and the Premier's office, and then make recommendations of what the hospital must do. It's very clear and straightforward, and those must be done. My job will be to make sure that they are actually being done. But I also said, it is definitely not only Helen Joseph. So this month, we are going to have a National Health Council where I'm going to unpack, because I've been singing a song about this infrastructure. The reason that the president mentioned infrastructure during the State of the Nation address was not because of Helen Joseph. The results were not yet out. It's because we told him so that we have got a big problem of infrastructure and HR in the healthcare system because of the budget cuts that happened over the years, which the minister today alluded to. I'm sure you heard him. He even gave an example of how healthcare is run in the country.
The US pulled out of giving South Africa the PEPFAR funding. Give us a picture of what are the implications of that for the country.
Well, the implication is that quite a number of services which people were receiving may be cut off, but mostly that the people who are earning from PEPFAR will no longer have salaries. But what we have made sure that must not happen is that anybody who's on ARVs must never stop taking them because they are of not getting them. Anybody who qualifies for ARVs must get them, must never be deprived of them. That is why even with that announcement, on the 25th of February, some 20 days after Trump made the announcement, we went to Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital Hall and announced and launched a program to look for 1.1 million more people who must go on ARVs. So we are going to make sure, and what we have done in terms of the patients who are receiving services from these clinics that have been closed, we are asking the Department of Health in provinces to come and absorb them in public health care services where they will get their help.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, the Health Minister. All the best in your work. I'm going to bring into this conversation now COGTA Minister, as well as IFP Leader Velenkosini Hlabisa. You were sitting in Cabinet this morning with the President. How was the mood in that meeting?
Thank you very much, and greetings to SABC viewers. The mood was very good. The GNU, we may even have some different views, but we are matured as leaders and as ministers. We were part of the engagement on the budget. The IFP was against the 2% VAT increase, but the movement through the engagement from 2% to 0.5, which is effectively for 1 year, and if then it happens to the maximum, only 2 years. We support this budget because we feel a budget must be credible. It must demonstrate the source of income. If you pass a budget that does not have credibility, it is a budget that is not good for the country. And secondly, if we decided to borrow this money, it was going to be a burden for generations to pay back that money. So now, a 0.5 VAT increase for 1 year at the minimum or 2 years is better than borrowing. Secondly, the amount of food items to be exempted has been expanded, which is going to be a big relief and a cushion to the poorest of the poor people in South Africa. More money is going to go to infrastructure, education and health. more job opportunities will be created, better services will be created. Because you see, if you have a budget that does not deliver services, it is as good as not existing. So a good budget should not be a heavy burden. There must be a balance between services and whatever that was put in order to create a revenue source. What is good is that more money was given to SARS because they promised that if they can get resources, they will collect the 800 billion rand, which is outstanding. Even if they can collect 400 billion rand, it will be a great relief to our country. And lastly, if you look at the budget, more money was given to provinces and municipalities, which will make service delivery better. Because if you have government at a provincial and a local government level that is unable to deliver because they don't have money, it is also not of any help to the people of South Africa. So we support this budget, and we also advanced the view which collectively we accepted, that immediately after this tabling, let us go back to the drawing board and identify more areas where we can reduce the expenditure and also identify areas to concentrate in order to grow the economy, which can speedily remove the 0.5 VAT increase in the second year.
Velenkosini Hlabisa, COGTA Minister, as well as the IFP leader. But we will hold you to account on that 100 billion rand for equitable share that is additional for municipalities. Hopefully, it will go to its intended purpose. All the best in your work. And it's a wrap for us in here in the precinct.